You know, I saw a skit in the course of last year, December last year. This fellow showed some international journalists who wanted to do a documentary in Nigeria. So when they got to Ikoyi, they saw high-rise buildings. It doesn't look like Africa. They moved to an industrial area, maybe in Ogun State or somewhere, you know, only looking grand. No, doesn't represent Africa. Then they now went to the village. Now saw red bricks and everything.
That's more like it.
So the cameraman was like, so all that one is not Nigeria. It's only the one that represents poverty. It was eye-opening of sorts.
Yes, I agree with you, absolutely. We're coming. It's taking us time, but we're coming. Yeah. I know that many won't like to believe that because we have so many people living in multidimensional poverty.
Exactly.
And we got the figure of 133 million, what, about 2 years ago?
3. Going to 3 now.
Going to 3 years ago. And it's the World Bank that told us that. And it now says that more than half of the people in African countries south of the Sahara, I mean, that area includes us, sadly, that we are living in multidimensional poverty. And this comes from their 2004 Key Development Challenges report,
2024.
which shows how the world is failing to reduce poverty. It measured using 3 things: how much money people have, which is less than $2.15 per person per day, their education, and whether they have basic services like electricity and water, not to mention education, because as far as I am concerned, that is now a basic. So government statistics from 2022 showed that 133 million people, like we said before, in Nigeria were living in multidimensional poverty. More poor people live in the north, about 86 million, than the south, which is about 47 million people. And many Nigerians cannot access clean cooking fuel, proper toilets, healthcare, enough food, and decent accommodation. These are all very sad. And it looked like since subsidy was removed in May last year, May 2023 rather, this is 2025, come on. Since all subsidy was removed, it seems that more people have fallen into poverty. Now, to look at this with us and maybe discuss ways of fighting the predicament in which we find ourselves, I'd like to welcome head consultant Intel Serve Incorporated, Mr. Roman Osegale.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we also have the Executive Director of Nigeria Network of NGOs, Mr. Oluseyi Oyebisi, who joins us virtually. Good morning, sir.
Morning, man. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Osegale, these figures are very depressing, if you ask me. This is the beginning of a new year, and we start the year by talking about more than half of our population living in poverty, no access to health care, no access to good food, no access to, and the list just goes on and on. So we need to find a way of dealing with this, Mr. Osegale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I said this about, was it 2-3 years ago when that index was released? And I said that obviously it wasn't going to get better.
Now, it wasn't?
Yeah, it wasn't going to get better. And
it hasn't?
Yet it hasn't, because numbers don't lie, right? The Multidimensional Poverty Index is a framework for assessing poverty that tracks deprivation across 3 dimensions and 10 indicators. I sent in some slides, right? They put up two slides. If you go to slide 1, you see that health, child mortality, nutrition, education, years of schooling, enrollment, living standard, water, sanitation, electricity, cooking fuel. Now, when you now go to the budget, because my job is to track things like this using numbers and where the problems actually lie, right? And how you can actually get out of this stuff. Now, go to slide 2, you'll find out that, look at the 2025 budget. Now, and these have always been the composition of the budget. First of all, your budget is the primary instrument of economic expansion. And you're supposed to put money where it will benefit lives, benefit the standard of living of the people, make life easier for them, not structure the budget in the sense that it puts money in private pockets. Now, when you look at infrastructure, if you go back to that slide, the slide 1, right? Living standard comes under majorly infrastructure. When you look at the infrastructure part of the budget on slide 2, it's only 4.06 trillion, which basically represents only about 8% of the budget. Health is 2.48 trillion, representing only 5% of the budget, and education, 3.52 trillion, representing only 7% in total. The major things that are supposed to create wealth in an economy and improve the standard of living only account for 20% of your budget. Mind you, Nigeria is a mineral resource-rich country, but a fiscal poor country. Did you get that? We are a mineral resource-rich country, but a fiscal poor country. We are a poor country. But what surprises anyone that knows how to read the budget, what you find out is that majority of the funds is now allocated to recurrent expenditure. So if we continue on this trajectory, honestly, it's not going to change. Nothing is going to change. The figures are there. They are very open. They speak for themselves. So it's just like saying you earn 100,000 naira a month, and you have maybe 4 or 5 kids, and rather than putting majority of those funds into investment that will better the lives of your family, you're putting 80%, you're going to nightclubs, you hang out at beer parlor, and you only spend 20% on what really matters in the house. You will never get out of poverty. That's just the baseline.
Mr. Oyebesi, it looks like since 2023, the inequality in our society has widened. You can see the clear divide between the rich and the poor. Those people who considered themselves to be middle class before, they seem to have been wiped out by rise in fuel prices, rise in power, food inflation. I mean, and the list just goes on and on. People are finding it more and more difficult to survive in this country. I mean, are we just going to let it continue?
I think no, we won't let it continue, and that's why we need a whole of sector approach to fighting poverty in the country. And also to establish the fact that there are activities being run or being done by government to address this. There are 3 areas where globally we agreed that if you want to solve issues around poverty, you must look at social protection systems. You must also look at how do you ensure that you tax people fairly, and that at the end of the day you're also able to measure and also understand how poverty is affecting population without leaving anyone behind. When you look at how the Nigerian government at this time is addressing poverty, you see that we have some social investment laws and also programs, which again has been ridden with corruption. And when you look at the budget, and I'm glad that we're bringing the budget conversation into this as well. We keep looking at the federal government budget only. We haven't looked at the budget of the 36 states that we have in the country as well. So for social protection in 2025, I think I'm seeing a 200 billion, budget that is there. You also want to look at issues around health and education, plus also energy poverty, the electricity conversation that we're having prior to this segment of the program itself. So the whole of sector approach will then mean that how do we share prosperity in ways that ensures that we can lift many out of poverty. At the moment, I do think from the last statistics I saw, the Nigerian government is only able to support 25 million people. If we're going to use the 133 million statistics that we have as at 2022 or thereabout, that means that there's still a lot of about 110 or 115 or thereabout that still needs to be lifted out of poverty. What is happening at the state level in being able to provide some level of social protection for these individuals that are vulnerable and that will need government support? We need to think through that and then begin to piggyback also on what are state governments budgeting for. There's a need for us to improve agriculture. There's a need for us to also find ways of ensuring that at the informal economy. I was reading a recent report by MoneyPoint that gives us a picture of what is happening at the informal economy. And that, in 1 month, most businesses in the informal economy would make like under 250,000 naira. When you take that back to the statistics of $2.15 in terms of poverty, those living under that World Bank benchmark of $2.15, which would go to over 3,000 naira at this time, you begin to see that those in the informal sector are making something like 8,000 naira per day. So how do we grow the informal sector in such a way that economy there can boom and more jobs can be created? Of course, that report that I quoted also mentioned that people between 18 and 34 thereabout would have small businesses, and the food vendor, retail businesses, agriculture are where you are seeing this business happening in the informal sector. How do we, at the state level, in all the 36 states of the Federation, grow these industries or these sectors in ways that helps us to create that prosperity so that people would be lifted out of poverty and they wouldn't depend on government handouts. So this is at the federal level.
Okay.
At the local government level, where we also have the issues of the local government autonomy, and the role of local government itself also has to be that we need to look at local government as a tool for development as well. And one is glad that now we have that autonomy. We need to shift attention also to the local governments in terms of their role in national development and how cumulatively can they bring all of this together.
Mr. Yebisi, I think we need to be a little more forthright and, should I say, decisive about the role of subnationals and the local governments, just as you have mentioned now. Because it will seem like every time we talk about these national figures and national issues, we look at just the federal government most of the time. Mr. Osagala, you will also be speaking to that in a short while. But because to a large extent, the data that came from the NBS, in collaboration with whoever they collaborated, says that as at going to 3 years now, 133 million Nigerians, and that we have benchmarked our living standards at $2.15 per day, which, as you said, is about 3,000 naira. Is the economy the same in Lagos as it is in Sokoto, which, according to that statistics, has the highest number of multidimensionally poor people in the country? So if we look at it from that perspective, is there a direct role, immediate role, for state governments concerning the people in their immediate environments and the local government? Is there a plan to take people out of poverty as we have seen the federal government plan it? Shouldn't we have the plans of the state governments in each of these states also detailing how they are intervening in the lives of their poor?
Absolutely, and that's the million-dollar question that we now need to start asking states. Where is your state development plan? And how does this help us to think through development within your immediate community? When you look at that statistics, it tells us how many people are in multidimensional poverty across the 36 states of the Federation. And we see Sokoto, for instance. How are we also looking at the budget of Sokoto state government to then say, what are they prioritizing? Are there social protection systems for the vulnerable? How are they prioritizing education? What are the regulatory guarantees that we have if businesses will go to Sokoto, for instance? What type of trade is happening, interstate trade is happening, taking advantage of what can be produced in Sokoto in abundance, can be taken down to either Lagos to make more money and collect more taxes, or brought back to somewhere in the southwest or somewhere in the southeast. What is happening in terms of growth at the local level? How have political leaders and also policymakers given us programs that can help us to grow the economy at the state level? What you have seen, and I always say this jokingly, to say that what you have seen at the federal level, if it is implemented 50-60% by states as well, we would see some level of progress. And now that we again have the local government autonomy, it is important that we also focus on the role of local governments. Okay. What is the role of local governments in community development?
I think that needs to be detailed out, because it is in the local governments that we have all of the mineral deposits that Nigeria has. But let me ask you, Mr. Osegale, isn't there a role for the subnationals? And I've seen the figures that you put out, the federal government's budget. We don't know what the budget of Lagos State is like, particularly solving these problems. Port Harcourt, River State, Taraba State, you name it.
Okay, I think it was last year or so, I ran through the 36 states, including the FCT, for the past 5 years, looking at education, health, and majorly all their budgets. If you can show me one state in Nigeria that runs a 70% capital expenditure and probably maybe a 30% recurrent expenditure, and I'll bring back my grandmother from the dead and tell you she's a virgin. You understand? Do you understand? See, the truth is this. The truth is this. Now, I during my research, I was going through some figures and trying to research something that a professor had said in the US, that to understand economics, you must liken it to the human physiology, right? That a single or a common code, if not properly attended to, can give you a lung infection. From lung infection, it will spread to your kidney, from kidney to this and that, and eventually to your heart, and eventually kill the host, right? Now, if you do not take your medication or you skip medications, you know what happens? Is that it can lead to complications and side effects. Now, they've given you, or you know the roadmap. We are always saying palliatives. We're saying social protection. That will only last you 3, maybe 4 weeks or 1-2 months. Then what happens afterwards? My solution has always been, and which I keep challenging and I'll continue to challenge, do the right thing. The other speaker was talking about farmers and all. Now, if you read the World Bank report, it states things like, or factors like, people within the hinterlands not being able to bring out or bring their goods, you understand, to the city. And then how much it costs them because of bad roads, and how much of the goods they have to lose in the process because it takes them days. That falls under infrastructure. Do you understand? Now, when you look at education, you look at health. For instance, there was a time I was on this program and I was talking about the middle class, which she just spoke about right now, and how much the middle class spend on school fees. To get out of poverty, you need money. That is the very first factor you need, so that it can propel you. You need money for investment. But when you are not able to get, there's a way I wrote it down here, that if there is no margin of income above survival that can be invested for the future, you can't get out of poverty. So when a person spends more than 50% of their income on school fees, and then what do they have left?
But is this a function of what the government does or what the economy is dictating? And I'm speaking specifically about the state governments, because are we saying that all decisions are made by the federal government?
No, it's not made by the federal government. But I said something earlier. Show me a state that is running a 70% capital expenditure.
You will bring your grandmother and scholarship. But is that to say that they are helpless totally?
Okay, let me say something. I spoke at the last platform, October 1st. The speaker before me, there are two things here: deliberate and, let's just say, oversight, right? Like in the budget. I don't want to believe that the budget is deliberate, but let me state something somebody said. And you cannot go on YouTube and look at the videos, and your station even covered it. He said there was this findings that northern lawmakers and senators have spent more time in the House than the southern ones. So he went out to do his findings. And in the process of talking to one or two people, they told him that, yeah, that's true, because you people from the South, you like education, so more people will contest the seat with you. But I am the only one who is educated in my constituency, and they have no choice than to keep representing me.
To keep me representing them?
Yes. No, to keep representing him every 4 years to contest. So that shows you that there are some deliberate efforts to keep people in abject illiteracy, so that they do not move forward. But
at the state level?
Yes, at the state level, because of some personal interest. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Those deliberate efforts. Okay, so why are you keeping these people down? Because of your own personal interest.
Now, so what makes that also worse, pardon me, Alero, is, and maybe I should ask Mr. Ibisi this one. Years ago, not too long ago, I think it was former President Obasanjo that was making a comment. He said, if we do not take care, we're already raising the next generation of terrorists, bandits in the country. And only because we are not giving enough attention to young people in the country. Which day was it? It was just over the weekend, no, in the course of the week. We were told by the Minister of Education that 70% of Nigerians are aged 30 and below. 70%. In another 10 years, we know what the figures will be. 20 years, we know what those people will be, where those people will be. And if they do not have the education that Mr. Segale is talking about, they do not have access to entrepreneurship, we can just imagine what we are rearing. And guess what? Each one of these young people live in states. What would be your proposition?
I think we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder. However, we must also understand that there are a lot of cultural, religious, and societal myths and thinking around education, as it were. And the fact that we have a vast level of population that are, not in school. You have the school program by the federal government and also with the support of the state governments, where children must be in school without having to be on the streets, hawking and all of those things. How have we implemented that? And what, like the other speaker said, how oversighting that, the state assemblies, the executives, the policymakers, the civil servants that are in charge of such programs. What does enforcement look like? Especially for addressing the issue of children that are meant to be in school, which is compulsory as a law. How do we ensure that that is properly implemented? But the economic conversations also then comes in, which is when you ask your ward to go to school, the infrastructure, the classrooms, how conducive are they? We do, of course, there's the 1 meal a day system that also exists that ensures that at least a child that comes to school would have a very good nutritional meal to eat. But when you look at the corruption there as well, and the fact that that is also not working effectively, then you say to yourself, is there anything we should have done that we're not doing in terms of policy? I think we have the policies. It's actually in the implementation and the actual oversight that needs to go in this direction, the questions that need to be asked by the state assembly members, by the National Assembly members, the questions that need to be asked by the governors themselves, who may have put commissioners in charge of education, the question that citizens themselves also need to ask, all right? Again, going back to the conversation around school fees, and I think we need to have an airline consensus. When you think you can afford better education for your ward, you take them to your private schools, right? Forgetting that public schools help you to save money, and that it is where others that are vulnerable can also get better education. But we all failed to focus on, getting better service delivery in terms of education. So we now need to come back and look at what exactly are state plans for education. What does the budget look like? What are they budgeting for? How do we get the state assemblies from being complacent to actually doing the work of oversighting on education and ensuring that parents who do not send their wards to school are properly encouraged to do that? Where they have failed to do that, implement the law. As you have said, it has to be compulsory for any children in any state from ages 5 or thereabouts to get up to secondary education. And if this education is also going to be free, let it be totally free. Provide books, ensure teachers are properly trained, ensure that we have systems that tracks outcomes, so that when a child goes into school, they are learning what should be learned, and that we have proper educational outcomes by the time they finish primary school and they progress to secondary school. But by JSS 3, we have a system that also ensures that they can go into trade if they do not want to further their education by going to university and all of this. How are we paying attention to technical education as well? I do understand that most parents would like their children to go to university or to go to the polytechnic, but at the end of the day, when they finish that university, they are still coming back to learn a skill. You find many of them going back to learn tailoring, learning graphics design, and all of those bits. How do we? There's also the part of curriculum development, ensuring that curriculum can teach us 21st century skills that can help us to think critically and also be able to be part of an economy that prospers for all of us as both Nigerians, Africans, and the world at large.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that question.
Okay.
And in responding to that question, I want to quote a book that was written in early 2000s. It says, "The destinies of the haves is intrinsically linked to the destinies of the have-nothings at all." That if the perpetrators of 9/11 may have been wealthy Saudi citizens, but they found succor and sanctuary in the poverty-stricken states of Afghanistan. This was written in 2002, and he said that Africa is not in the front line against terrorism, but it soon could be. Now, NBS released the data of ransom paid in 12 months. 2.23 trillion ransom was paid in 12 months. Now, the 2 to 3 million out-of-school children of the late 90s and early 2000s, and then the 68 million that lived in poverty then, are the ones terrorizing us today.
Yes.
Like what you said, today we now have how many people? 18.5 to what? To 20 million kids outside school. And 133 million living in multidimensional poverty. Nobody needs a soothsayer to tell us what will be happening in the next 10, 15 years. And what baffles me, to be very honest, is that you and I, government, everybody in this country, we still go about our normal business. We buy the expensive cars, we live the expensive life, we live the luxurious life we want to. When everybody is supposed to be rolling up their sleeves, the destinies of the haves is intrinsically linked to the destinies of the have-nothings at all. In the next 10, 15 years, you and I may not be able to step out. True. That's the truth.
True. Mr. Sayale, you know, when I think about this penchant that we have now for giving palliatives to people, it doesn't sit well with me, because I think about, don't give them fish, teach them how to fish. Then I remember, I mean, paradoxically, I also recall when Raji Fashola was governor of Lagos State, and he tried to remove area boys from the streets and teach them some kind of vocation. And most of these kids ran away. They ran away from those vocational centers. So they were so used to getting handouts or terrorizing people to get something out of them that they did not even want to use their hands to do any work. So we have got to the stage now where even those you want to teach to look after themselves are not interested in doing anything productive. Where does that leave us?
It leaves us in a very dangerous situation. One, see, I've always said this, that you don't tell people what to do. You teach them through examples. You see, those people that were not ready to learn skills are looking at the people at the top. When you have, why should I go and learn a skill when I am from Ekpoma in Edo State and I can translate trillions in numbers into words, but somebody there cannot translate billions into words. Ouch. Right? So why do I need to go learn a skill when I can go and do area talk?
And I can become the governor.
I can become the governor, I can become this or that. You understand? So you see what is happening, and they see where the funds and monies are flowing from. Do you understand? So it's a big problem. And until there's a reverse of psychology, there's a reverse of ideology, there's a reverse of the examples from the ruling class, from the elites of the country.
Our role models.
Yes, and they look at them as role models, of people who are working, who are not they're not dependent on government money to live the luxurious life. Then things might start to change, because through your example, you will be teaching these people the essence and the value of hard work.
Work.
Mr. ABC, there's something about the president said about values, saying he's going to commission a values charter. Along the line, he also talked about a youth conference that's going to last 30 days. Do you think this issue of multidimensional poverty, particularly as it relates to young people, do you think it's an issue that should be iconic during that conference?
Certainly, it should be an issue that should be on the front of mind and front burner for any strata of the population that we have, from young to old to Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and all of those bits. It's an issue that affects all of us. Poverty doesn't know any age, it doesn't know any tribe. But I do think that the conversations that will be held may not necessarily get us anywhere. And why am I saying that is, while there's the need for us to have stakeholder consultations and speak to young people, understand their issues, you also need a civil service that can listen to everything, turn all of that into an action or an aspiration that then goes into a development plan or a work plan, and that is properly budgeted for, right? And not only budgeted for, cash backed and fund is released for those to be addressed. And whatever the issues are, they are issues that we've already heard somewhere in reports and all of that. Of course, I'm not saying don't consult with young people, but don't make it a jamboree. Make sure that we listen properly, and that when we listen to understand the issues, and that in understanding the issues, we're able to use that to develop an action plan that is well resourced, both technically and politically, but also monitored for proper implementation, and that you come back to also tell these young people how you are implementing whatever has been agreed and what bottlenecks you're seeing and how you are retooling and also ensuring that this we can see results for them.
Okay.
You will find conversations on poverty, you find conversations on unemployment, you find conversations on security, you would find conversations on maybe boosting the economy and all of that. All of these are things that we already know. You look at the National Development Plan, there are things that are there already. I was reading the skills gap report that was developed during the first term of Buhari's regime. Very detailed report. Again, what have we done there?
Okay.
So it's not for this. We need to find a way of it doing shop, not just a talk shop now.
Okay.
There has to be some level of action,
Okay.
and we need to move speedily as well.
Sorry, we don't even have time to take your last words on this because we've run completely out of time. So I'd just like to thank Mr. Oluseyi Oyebisi, Executive Director of Nigeria Network of NGOs, who joined us virtually, and Mr. Roman Osegale, Head Consultant, IntelServe Incorporated. Thank you very much. And we wish you both a Happy New Year indeed. Now it's time to look at healthy lifestyle tips for 2025. See you in just a moment.